that the efforts of our team, of our investigators, bring some small measure of closure to the family and all those impacted by this. This homicide took place on January 10th, 2025 at the Burger Point restaurant at 444 West Mill Street. This brazen attack happened in broad daylight, in full view of patrons and employees who were working at the restaurant. Our investigators immediately assumed the case and worked tirelessly and quickly developed leads that ultimately identified and led to the apprehension of the suspects who orchestrated this murder. I want to publicly commend the team for their outstanding work in this case. However, I want to make it known that this is not an anomaly. Our homicide team has an 80% clearance rate, which is far significantly higher than the national average, meaning that if you commit a murder in the city of San Bernardino, there's an 80% chance that you will be hunted down and you will be brought to justice. It's also critically important to inform our community that this was an isolated incident. I understand full well that when incidents like this occur, it brings a lot of fear and concern for personal safety. But there was never a general threat to the community, as we learned very quickly that these criminals targeted this victim in a murder for hire scheme that was stemming from a contentious divorce from one of the suspects, Sergio Reveles. I want to also quickly thank our partner agencies who assisted us with this investigation: the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, the Riverside Sheriff's Department, the California Highway Patrol, the FBI, and the Bakersfield Police Department Violent Criminal Apprehension Team. Now I'm going to invite Detective Dominic Martinez up to discuss some more details of the case.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you guys for being here. We're going to start off by playing the initial video that we had to start our investigation off. As my chief said, it was at the Burger Point here in San Bernardino in the 400 block of West Mill Street. So you'll see up in the left corner there, the television, is the suspect vehicle. This is our victim walking out to her vehicle, the Mercedes SUV. That's our suspect vehicle coming up. The front passenger is going to exit the vehicle, later identified as Geraldo Llamas. During this time, there's some sort of conversation going on. He's asking for her purse, gets a hold of her purse. You see he does have a firearm in his hand. He does make an attempt to shoot at her. The victim was able to fight back. There's still a struggle over the firearm. You'll see some citizens did attempt to help her out, but who were also shot at. There's a total of 9 rounds shot at the victim, with one expanded casing, which was from the gun jamming when the victim was fighting back. And chasing around the vehicle, firing multiple times at her. At this point, the victim does make an attempt to run inside the business for safety. Unfortunately, she was struck, slowed her down, and the suspect again shot her an additional time with a fatal wound. When officers arrived on scene, they located her in the doorway, unresponsive. She was immediately pronounced deceased by paramedics. There was a citizen who was able to provide us a license plate and description of the vehicle that the suspects had fled in. And then we were also given this video surveillance immediately, which assisted greatly in the investigation. Later on during the investigation, we located this SUV, being the suspect SUV, abandoned on the east side of town in the Walmart parking lot. Surveillance in the local area was checked. The suspects had then got into a second vehicle, which was located at another business. There we saw that the suspects had changed their clothing and went inside a business for a short amount of time, got in the second vehicle, and fled the area. Within approximately 4 hours, we had both suspects identified: the shooter, Geraldo Llamas, the driver, Arnold Ruelas, were ID'd as our suspects. The very next morning, we had our surveillance team with the Inland Regional Apprehension Team, part of the FBI, conduct surveillance on Llamas in Bakersfield, California, and then also conduct surveillance on Mr. Arnaldo Ruales in Los Angeles, California. We recovered the initial vehicle that they had fled in, the SUV. In that vehicle, there was evidence leading us to additional suspects and evidence with the case. So approximately a week later, Thursday, I believe the 16th of January, we obtained arrest warrants for Llamas and Ruales. Teams with the Bakersfield and FBI teams served warrants at the Bakersfield residence, and then teams with our undercover local agencies served warrants at Ruales' residence. So there was always one thing that we had always asked ourselves, like, what's the link between the victim and our two suspects? Just always something that was in the back of our minds. So looking at further evidence that was recovered during the initial search warrant of the vehicle and following up on leads on these gentlemen, we determined that the third suspect, Reynaldo Ruales, was the brother of Arnaldo Ruales. I was able to then determine that Mr. Reynaldo had worked for a Juan Perez at a local pallet company in the city of San Bernardino. The pallet company that he ran was owned by our victim, Ms. Torres, and her husband, Sergio Reveles. So there's the link that we found between all of our subjects. A search warrant then was authorized for Reynaldo's residence, and a large amount of U.S. currency was located in his house, along with a large amount of U.S. currency at Mr. Arnaldo's residence. Additionally, the suspect, Llamas, currency was located at his residence and on his person. Also, the clothing and additional evidence related to the investigation was located at each suspect's residence. So we did end up talking to each of the individuals, and then we ended up getting a lead to Mr. Perez and then Mr. Reveles. From there, we served a 7-location search warrant on businesses and residents related to all the individuals involved. There we were assisted by the FBI, CHP, Riverside Sheriff's, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. During those search warrants, there was evidence related to the crime recovered, to include large amounts of money, over $200,000 in cash, and numerous firearms. These subjects were later arrested and booked for the murder of Yesenia Torres. So all subjects, all 5 suspects, are currently in custody for her murder.
Next up to speak about the case is going to be San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson.
Thank you. Good morning. As a result of the investigation that the chief and detective have talked about, when this case was turned over to our office, the initial arrest of the first 3 defendants was on January the 16th. We filed the case on the 21st of January as to the first 3, the shooter and the 2 getaway drivers. And when we filed that case, we filed special circumstances that related to those 3 individuals. That's currently where it stands. As a result of the continued investigation that San Bernardino Police Department engaged in, the other agencies, the 2 additional suspects were arrested on February the 13th. We also filed murder charges against the business partner, Mr. Perez, and the husband, and also alleged 3 special circumstances that relates to all 5 defendants. And so currently what they're each looking at is a count of murder with all the special circumstances that would include lying in wait, financial gain, and the crime committed in the commission of a robbery. And that's currently how we'll proceed. I want to be very, very clear that any time the DA's office talks about these matters, there's only so much that we can go into just to give you the logistics of what we filed, when we filed it, why we filed it. Each of these individuals are innocent until proven guilty. That's the protections that they have in this country, and we're glad for that. The next hearing, as it relates to all 5 of the defendants, will be on March the 14th. We were fortunate that we were able to link up all 5, even though the arrest and the charges happened at separate times. We will proceed on this matter as is currently alleged, with the potential of special circumstances as a result of some of the facts that you've heard here, and obviously the tragedy and travesty of having an individual that was essentially assassinated at one of her favorite eateries in San Bernardino. Is a very, very sad case. So I commend the department here, specifically Chief Goodman, his team, everybody who worked on this case. It was an unbelievably tireless effort because you could sense all along that there had to be more to the story. We believe that we've actually encapsulated the entire story, but their diligent work to go from January 10th until February the 13th to be able to get 5 defendants in one case with the evidence that they presented to us that is the result of the charges. I commend their agency and everybody else who was involved in it, and particularly witnesses who came forward very early on and were willing to give statements and try to make identifications, and ultimately that led to the arrest of all 5 of those. So just appreciate your time this morning and allow us to explain who we charge and why we charge it and the theories going forward. Sergeant, it's all yours.
All right, at this time, we can field a few questions if anybody has any. Just keep in mind that we will have a press release that will be out later today as well.
Question about, and I know there's a lot you can't talk about, but is there someone can give us a little bit more of the narrative of the murder for hire part of it? It sounds like you said the suspect, Sergio Rodelas, was in the middle of a contentious divorce with the victim, but was there evidence that he, on his cell phone, that he wanted to hire these people to commit this murder? How much money did he pay? Is there any more to that narrative you guys can give?
That might be best answered by Detective Dominic Martinez.
Thank you.
Like I said, unfortunately, there's not much information when it comes to the amount of money that we can release. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence for this case to say that it is a murder for hire case. As you saw, there was money located at the residence of each of our suspects, along with firearms located, which is all related to this case. But unfortunately, at this time, we can't give the facts as to when, where, and how much money was released.
Could we say thousands, tens of thousands, at least a general?
Yes,
Tens of thousands or thousands?
you're close to the hundreds.
So hundreds of thousands?
Yes.
Okay, for each
Stop there.
amount of cap.
Yeah, unfortunately, can't disclose that.
Can you guys also elaborate on, so she had no connection to this eatery, correct? It was just a pallet business? Or
So they, being the victim, Ms. Torres and Mr. Reveles, her husband, they own multiple businesses within our county, LA County, Riverside County. There's assets in the millions that they have, but they have strong ties to the city of San Bernardino.
So could you say that because it was a contentious divorce, were they battling over who was gonna take which business, how much money each person was gonna get?
So the divorce has been a process for over 2 years. And as you know, when there are multiple millions of dollars involved, there is going to be some going back and forth over assets. I can't say specifically for this case which assets, if any, they were going to fight over or arguing over. But we know that, as we said earlier, that it was definitely a murder for hire case. There is evidence to show that the suspects did stalk our victim for several days and months prior to this murder.
Was the divorce, sounds like the divorce was not finalized, correct?
It was not.
You say the suspect stalked the victim, you're talking about the husband, Mr.
So-
Sergio Rodelas?
No, I'm talking about Mr. Llamas Ruelas, Arnold Ruelas and Reynaldo Ruelas. On the day of the murder, they were stalking her for several hours. They actually met at a local place, being Mr. Llamas and Ruelas. They met in 2 separate vehicles, one being our vehicle that you guys saw in the video surveillance, and then the other being the getaway vehicle. They met in an area of the city and went to the victim's residence and watched her for several hours, following her to her business, and then following her to the eatery where the murder occurred.
Was that first suspect vehicle one of theirs? Was it a stolen vehicle?
It was one of their vehicles.
Where's the pallet company?
So it's actually in the southern portion of the city, Sergio's Pallets.
The person running around, chasing her around, shooting at her, who was that individual in this group?
That is going to be Mr. Llamas, Geraldo Llamas, who was the front passenger, and then Arnaldo Ruas was the driver of the vehicle. They were the only two occupants of the vehicle at the time.
And Arnaldo is Sergio's brother?
Arnaldo is Reynaldo's brother.
And what was the suspect vehicle again, I'm sorry?
Suspect vehicle was the gray, it was a Ford Escape. And then our victim's vehicle was the Mercedes SUV.
I know you said that you guys had discovered the clothing at each person's home. How did you know that that was the clothing that they were wearing at the time? Did you find blood on any of the clothing, or what?
So
What would you say?
there was, as you know, there's surveillance cameras everywhere. In this case, it was fortunate that we were able to find a lot of good surveillance all the way from the victim's residence to her place of employment to where the incident occurred, to where they dropped off vehicles and changed vehicles, and we're able to match up all the clothing they were wearing throughout the incident there and there when they fled.
Was the victim residence also in San Bernardino?
No,
Can you say what city that was?
no, sir.
Just to confirm, Reynaldo Ruelas is the one who worked at the pallet company that was owned by the victim and the husband.
So Ronaldo worked for Juan Perez, who had a pallet company on the property that the victim and her husband owned.
And when you found that out, that was sort of one of these aha moments, like
Yeah, like I said, the whole time it was always like, hey, what's the link between all these people? Like we couldn't find that link, and it's always why when you conduct these investigations. And then when that happened, as we were serving search warrants at two of the suspects' houses, it was like you say, that awe moment where it's like, all right, we got it, we figured it out.
This question is for Jason Anderson. If convicted on all charges, special circumstances, what could these people be facing?
They could be facing, three different things, depending on which direction we would go. We haven't considered any of the directions. So, 25, 50 to life on determinate stuff. Special circumstances obviously would carry with it either life without parole or potential death penalty.
And each of them is charged with the same thing?
Correct. They are, yeah.
Has your office decided yet whether or not it will pursue the death penalty?
No, sir.
I'm sorry, I need to clarify one more thing with Detective Martinez on. So Juan Perez, you said, owned the pallet company at the pallet company, or can you clarify that a little more? It was on the property of the Torres and Reyes.
Yeah, like I said, they own several businesses and properties, they being the victim and her husband.
Okay.
They own several properties, and so Juan leased the business from the victim and her husband.
So he was running the pallet company.
Correct,
So he was leasing the pallet company, they were the owners, but he was running it.
correct.
All right, we want to thank all of you for coming today. Again, this is, it was an extensive investigation, and it is also still ongoing. We will have the press release issued out later today.